Our guest today is the house whisperer, Brent Hull.
Brent is a master builder, historic millwork designer, museum quality preservationist. He's also an author, YouTuber, social media influencer, speaker, and he has his own podcast called Passion for Craft.
Like I said, house whisperer.
Yeah, I'm Brent Hull. I'm a contractor, millwork guy, and a old house lover in Fort Worth, Texas. Been doing this for about 30 years, and very grateful to be on the show.
Hello and welcome, Brent.
Hi, Brent. Thanks for being here. When I told our listeners that you were going to be on the show, I got so many messages of excitement.
Good.
They were happy you were going to be here. And of course, we are too.
Good. That's great.
Yeah.
I had the same experience as Stacy posting about you, and oh my God, he's coming on the show. So for those uninitiated, or even for us, I mean, I sort of feel like I know you through Instagram and stuff, but who is Brent Hull and how did you get to this point?
Well, about 30 years ago, I went to a school in Boston called North Bennett Street School. 2-year hands-on preservation training. It's a preservation carpentry course. And going there kind of taught me, how houses were built 250 years ago. And the contrast between that and the way things were crafted and houses today was so stark, was so powerful that it's kind of steered my course towards building new houses with an old soul and restoring buildings and houses and helping people with design too, because, I've said that most houses after probably 1960 or 70 have no style, and people want style. They want beauty. They want something well crafted. And unfortunately, most houses aren't that way. So I find myself fixing a lot of houses for people that want kind of a historic precedent in their houses. But that North Bennett Street really shaped me and molded me into the guy I've turned into today, for better or worse.
We're familiar with the school, and it is absolutely fantastic. I think it's changed a lot of lives.
Yeah, I'm on the board now, and my son's there. He's just in his first year in that same program. He was an engineering student and decided he wanted to come on board, and so I was like, well, you have to go there. So it's it's exciting, and I'm looking forward to seeing what he brings to the company.
That's neat. Family company. I love it.
Yeah, no, it's great.
So I think of you as very much kind of a architectural historian, expert kind of person, and you've described yourself as a contractor and millwork guy. I was wondering, it's sort of been my experience, like working with architects, that this knowledge tends to just be sort of lost or maybe immediately forgotten or never taught in the first place. Can you help me make sense of that as somebody in your position? I mean, do you experience the same thing, and what do you think the solution is? Or is there a problem in the first place?
It's something I talk about quite a bit because I think essentially I just did a video on YouTube called 20 Years That Changed Home Building. And it really focuses back to that period right before World War II with the Great Depression and the World War. There was a period of time where we just weren't building as many houses as we used to. And coming out of that time, there was a strong focus on building and design. And a lot of things changed. The architect was never, historically, architects make up 1% to 3% of all houses that are built. And so it's not a high percentage. Most, houses come from plan books and builder books and things like that. Even historically, that's true. But what happened with architects is that there was a strong push after World War II for modernism. And if you look at the way Frank Lloyd Wright or Mies van der Rohe or any of those great architects studied and learned, it was by studying the past. And École des Beaux-Arts in France, that was the great school for teaching architecture. Historic precedent was really what they were about. And they were looking at the past to kind of design forward. Now, architects want to be original. They want to be, and to be a great architect, you have to be unique and different. And, Frank Gehry's buildings, for better or worse, he's pushing that envelope. And unfortunately, architects feel like they have to be great, you have to be an individual. And that really wasn't the way, historic architects and historic buildings used to be built. And so you have this market now where most people want a traditional house, something nostalgic, something that they reminds them something that's designed around something. And most architects aren't trained to do that. And so, those Instagram reels and the YouTube videos I do really they're fixing houses, but most of the time people can't believe that, how could an architect design this? Most of the times an architect didn't design it, right? And so, and two, just because the architect went to architecture school doesn't mean that he understands traditional design. And so there's only a few architectural schools in the country that still base their teaching on classical or traditional design ideals. And so most architects, don't understand that a column has emphasis, has shape and movement, don't understand how to build an entablature, don't understand all of those traditional things that used to be common knowledge and that's been lost. And so long answer to the fact that, architects just aren't being trained in that world anymore. And it's kind of poo-pooed and looked down upon. And so you end up seeing a lot of traditional houses that are really bad, poorly executed if you look at it from an historical precedent and how we used to build. So it's a lost art of building, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It looks, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No.
I was going to say, it seems to me like, when you make a copy of something and then you make a copy from the copy and then you make a copy from the copy of the copy. I feel like that's where we're going with these houses. And it feels like all the good things just keep getting sort of dropped off. And then we have this weird kind of mishmash of whatever it is. Like visually, we can see that it's not quite right, even if we don't understand the actual math behind it or what you're talking about, the architectural principles.
Yeah, I think that if you look at like a bungalow house from the early 1900s, that house was built and designed around a philosophy. It was a rejection of the heavy ornamentation of the Victorian era. It was a desire for simplicity. It was a desire for just honesty in building. And so there wasn't this false ornamentation. There weren't bright colors. And so all the parts and pieces that went into that house were around a philosophical ideal. So moldings were stained and not painted, let the natural beauty of the wood come through. Floor plans opened up. Hardware was simplified. It wasn't ornamented kind of unnecessarily. And so, but all the parts and pieces that went into that house, even the brackets that hold up the eaves, were functional ornamentation. And so the house was designed around a philosophical ideal, a theme, and houses today aren't. Houses today are assembled. The builder says, go pick your brick, go pick your siding, go pick your windows, and I'll install it. So they're assembling parts and pieces, and it's really hard for homeowners. And I wrote about this in my book, The Timeless House, building a timeless house in an instant age. There's a number of things that happen. One is that there's this paradox of choice that they go to pick hardware out at the hardware store. And if you've been to a hardware store, there's this wall of all these pulls. And you're like, well, what do I choose? And it's so overwhelming that they end up, don't know what to pick. And so if there was a philosophical ideal, if there was a precedent, if there was a story, which is what I tell people to kind of create a narrative, then it helps them make choices, helps them make better decisions for lighting, for hardware, for moldings, for hierarchy and rooms. I mean, just all the materials that you pick, all the way you put your house together, therefore, would be cohesive and not kind of haphazard.
Mm-hmm.
Such a ringing endorsement for hiring a design professional.
Yes,
so I guess,
true.
To distill it a little bit, it seems like at the root, a lot of architecture education does not actually really align with the American taste. So you get architects learning modernism and learning, in school to build foam core projects that are really cool and experimental. And then they get out into the world and everyone actually just wants a beautiful house that doesn't feel scary or cold. And so it seems to me the modern homeowner client, whatever, actually needs to have a lot more information than they might have in the past.
Yeah, 100%. Most of the really good traditional architects that I know today, and there are a lot of them, are self-taught. were not trained,
Interesting.
or the things that they learned in architecture school, they realized, and I've heard these stories from them, that something's missing. And I remember one architect telling me, I went to Europe, or I was in an historic neighborhood, walking around, thinking about the things that I was being trained, and looking at the buildings and these historic buildings, going, no, what they're telling me is not lining up with what I'm seeing. And so it began a journey for them of trying to figure out how to build beautifully again. And it was by looking back instead of looking forward. So, I've heard stories that, because they're trying to be unique and individualistic, because they're trying to be, cutting edge. I had an architect tell me a story that when she was in school, the professor one day told them to take off their shoes and socks, put the pencil between their toes, and they were going to draw floor plans with their toes, right? It's just like, okay, so he's trying to be creative. He's trying to get them to think outside the box, but wow,
But why? Why?
yeah.
Right?
Another architect told me that it wasn't until they got out of school that they were on a building job site, and they took the sheetrock or plaster off the wall, and she saw the studs in the wall, and she goes, oh, that's those X's I've been drawing on my plans, right? She didn't understand the relationship between a stud in a wall and just kind of how it was all put together. So there's a disconnect, and those are maybe extreme stories, but I think they're anecdotal of the overall problem, that you're just not being trained, and they don't understand that historic precedent and the lost art of building.
So in terms of, one of my favorite things that you do are these house fixes. So for those who haven't seen them, Brent will take a photo of a existing house that is uninspiring and overlay it with vellum, trace it, and change elements, but generally very subtly. You're changing column sizes, window sizes, maybe eliminating an eave that really doesn't need to be there, that kind of thing. For those who aren't lucky enough to get your vellum treatment, do you have I get this question a lot, like any just good overview resources for homeowners who want to learn this kind of stuff so that they make better decisions in the course of renovating?
Yeah, I get that question a lot too. And I get it from builders too. They like, I like what you do. How did you get trained? What do I read? How do I get better at what you're doing? And there's not really a one book that's kind of put it all together for me. And so, I'm nearly 60. I'm an old man. So part of it is just learning over time, just being a student of it. And my career went through a number of different iterations. I've always been a preservationist, but being trained in historic preservation, you're looking at historic house styles and seeing the differences and changes that happen from the Georgian to the Federal to Greek Revival to Victorian, right? You're seeing those changes, and the windows and the scale changes, and the building methods change. And all of a sudden you're seeing what the Industrial Revolution does to building. And there's a lot of it is understanding this kind of broad spectrum of how houses have been put together and seeing the differences. I next went through a period of time where I was studying classicism. If your listeners don't know about the ICAA, Institute of Classical Architecture and Art, they need to, because that's where I learned. I went to classes there on proportion, on moldings, on the 5 orders of architecture, and you begin to understand the classical methods for building beautiful things, and the proportions and the human scale and the golden ratio, and how all those things, regulating lines, how all those things help build a building together and put it together. And then you take that classicism with the historic precedent, and you see how that classicism changes in the Greek Revival and the Victorian and even in the arts and crafts. So, right, it's a Venn diagram for these things overlapping. And then you I hope you're seeing what's happening is it's a lot of putting things together. And unfortunately, it's not easy. It takes a lot of studying and a lot of looking. And you can see the books behind me, all the wall of books and stuff. And there's another room on the other side.
Those are fake, Brent. Come on.
Cardboard covers. No, that's a lot of books.
That's where it comes from. So unfortunately, there's not a do this and you can do this. So it's a lot of study.
Sure.
Okay, good. I've been answering the question correctly. I don't know.
I am going to put the ICAA information in the show notes, though,
Yeah,
because I
that's
think people
great.
might be
Thank you.
really interested in learning more about that. That's really helpful.
Yeah, their website's wonderful. They have great seminars. They have great teaching things you can learn from. So there's a ton of content there if anybody wants to go there.
And I think I want to add, too, that, Brent, you've written several books yourself. In fact, you have one coming out in April. It's available for pre-order now. It's called Millwork. I think it's just Millwork, right?
Historic millwork.
Historic Millwork. Okay, I've pre-ordered it. Looking forward to it.
Nice.
So I'm going to drop a link for that in the show notes as well.
Thank you.
But yeah, you've got some books to read. Then we can all catch up by reading your books as well.
Yeah.
Well, Brent, I mean, I was going to say this too, not to hold you to your original definition of yourself, but contractor and millwork guy does not also include content creator, which you have found yourself kind of being a juggernaut. So you have over 100,000 followers on Instagram. You have a YouTube series. You've written books. Like, can you talk about how is the sausage made? Like, how did this evolve?
Yeah, I think I'm a learner, right? And so I really enjoy discovery and I really enjoy that path. And so I think a lot of what happens for me is that I just want to share what I've learned and I want other people to be inspired and to grow and to improve. And so that's where I think a lot of that comes from, just the desire to share. It's a little bit exhausting. I'm trying to find the right blend of material and I do 2 videos a week on YouTube. I'm thinking about cutting that back to maybe 2 a month instead of 2 a week so that I can make longer, more, just delve into things a little bit more. So I'm still trying to find the balance, but most of it comes from just a desire to share what I've learned and I really do love it. And so just hoping other people appreciate it. And I get some nice comments that helps people. So that's always encouraging.
Well, as one content creator to another, it is exhausting. And I thought you were going to use the B word of balance. And I was like, yeah, I don't think the balance it exists. We just keep trying to put out content, and it is an ongoing struggle for many of us.
Yeah.
Whatever you're doing it great, though.
Yes.
Thank you. That's very nice.
It's very compelling. Can't
Thank you
recommend
so
it enough.
much.
True Tales from Old Houses is supported by Repaint Studios. Okay, confession time, Daniel. In the past, how did you store your paint tray when you were mid-project?
You're not going to like this, but I would use those cheap plastic liners and then I would store them in the trash.
No judgment from me. I used a trash bag and that was a sticky, icky mess. But now I use the repaint tray.
Okay, me too, but let's spread the word.
Billy, who invented the repaint tray, knew that this was a problem for so many, so she created the solution, and now her woman-owned business is disrupting the painting industry. It's like Tupperware, but for your paint tray.
Absolutely. And the tray itself, I'd like to note, is a very heavy-duty metal, so it doesn't slide around, wobble, or bend when you're using it. Plus, when you're done painting, you can just let the paint dry in the silicone liner, and then you get to peel it off, which is exactly as satisfying as it sounds.
The tray, silicone liner, and lid, they're all built to last. So that's better for you and for the planet. It is the last paint tray you'll ever need, so you can save those garbage bags for the trash can.
Snag one for yourself at repaintstudios.com.
And for 10% off your order, use the coupon code TrueTales10. True Tales from Old Houses is also supported by Old House Hub, brought to you by My Old House Fix. I have a question for you, Daniel, and
Okay.
you can answer for our listeners. Have you ever spent hours scrolling Facebook groups, Reddit threads, obscure websites, random YouTube videos, trying to find answers about your old house project?
Stacey, I'm an old homeowner. Of course I've done that. Not to mention, those like deep dives where you come out 3 hours later and you know everything about Victorian paint colors, but you still have zero idea how to fix your house.
And that's why we're so excited to tell everyone about Old House Hub from My Old House Fix.
It's like a headquarters for all things Old House. It's an exclusive online community where you can gather resources, browse archives by topic, connect with fellow enthusiasts, and get expert advice. It's also a place where you can share your passions without getting lost in endless social media feeds.
And there's no creepy AI algorithm suggesting totally unrelated content. It's just good, meaningful conversations with people who get it. So no more scrolling, no more headaches, just connection and answers.
Beautiful. It's like old school internet for Old House lovers. And the best part is right now, True Tales from Old House's listeners can get a 1-year membership to Old House Hub for free with the coupon code TrueTales.
That great deal is only available during this season of the podcast. When season 12 ends, the deal ends.
So don't wait. Visit oldhousehub.com to join the Old House Hub community for free and finally get a go-to place for your Old House questions, projects, and inspiration.
I don't want to put you in a spot, but are there any like new building techniques or products or just things that you actually do think are an improvement in the trade that are new? Did I say new? Should I restart that?
No, you're good.
That's good.
Okay.
I mean, I think I would take 100-year look at what's new, and I would say that, I just did a video that on insulation. Really, we didn't start insulating our houses really until after World War II. I didn't get into this, but the last part of my career, the last probably 5 or 8 years, I've been studying build science. Build science is a big buzzword on the building side, and it's basically a desire to make houses as efficient as possible. It's a two-edged sword because on one side, people go, I'm going to make my old house efficient, and they go, I'm going to take out my windows. That's the first thing I'm going to do. That's a terrible decision.
Exactly.
And it's a waste of money, and you're never going to see that money back. The figures that I've seen are between 40 and 120 years to repay in energy bills to see that money back. And I've done videos that talk about that. And so it's just terrible waste, not to mention the fact that most of those windows aren't going to last more than 20 years. It's a disposable product. Sorry, soapbox, another time.
Oh no,
Yeah.
you are
love
talking.
this
Yeah, I was
soapbox.
going to say
This
you are talking.
soapbox.
You're talking to
Yeah.
the right person. I just finished co-authoring a book on that very subject. So yeah, you're good. We're here for it.
We need more of that out there. And so I think the biggest bang for your buck is insulation. Now, I hate foam insulation, and there is you probably know this, but there is a article in the BBC about a month ago that basically the lenders have stopped lending money to houses that have foam in England. And so
Right. The
and
spray
it's-
foam. Yeah.
Yeah, the spray foam, the open cell spray foam. And the problem with the foam is that when foam, and I used to use a lot of foam in every house and was proud of it, but we began to have problems and we began to have rotting. We began to have all these things. And I'm just like, I think it's our generation's asbestos. And I think that we are going to start seeing lenders, not lending money on a house that has foam because it holds water. I think builders and inspectors are going to start falling through roofs because things have rotted out and people don't know it. And so it's a terrible product. In any case, I think the biggest bang for your buck is putting insulation in, either a mineral wool or cellulose or something like that, something that can dry out. That's a product that I think would benefit a lot of homeowners if they would put insulation in their houses in the right places. And I think, can't remember the question, is there a better product today? Is that what that was?
Are there new technologies and things that we like? And sounds like the answer is basically no.
No. But actually, can I interject here? Because I've got a follow-up now that you're talking about insulation, because people ask me all the time, where should I put insulation? How should I do this? And I guess, would it be fair to say that insulating an old house in particular, I guess, is somewhat of a complex decision? Like, I think it would be one of those where you would need to consult someone and come up with a bunch of different ideas and then use the one that makes the most sense for your situation. I mean, is it fair to say that? Because everybody wants the answer. What should I buy and where should I put it? And I don't think it's that simple.
Unfortunately, it's not that simple. And the quick answer is in the attic. There's the quick answer, because most of your energy loss goes out to your ceiling. But in the South, our AC units are in the attic, and we like to encapsulate the rafter lines not the ceiling joists, so that you're not making ice cream in an oven, is the term I've heard, where it's 140 degrees and you're trying to make this really cool air. But if you can encapsulate the rafters, you can drop that temperature down, 30 or 40 degrees, and it becomes a more efficient way of cooling the house. Next place is in your walls, but the walls can be a really inefficient and invasive way to try to get insulation in the walls. But yes, to answer your question, or to agree with you, it is complex, and because the type, how you put it in, your installation is really important, and what climate zone you're in is all going to drive that decision. And there's houses that were made in the 20s and 30s that have structural clay tile walls that you can't put insulation in those walls, and so it's hard. And then people look, well, I'm just going to fix my windows. That too is possibly throwing good money after bad. So anyway, yes, it's hard.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I think
So
what's
then-
hard too is like when you hire that expert to come into your home and do an audit and make recommendations, like so often, I think they will absolutely recommend that you spray foam your whole rim joist and
Oh, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
spray everything.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
the going back to your question, I think a tankless water heater is a better way, is a more efficient way, and you don't have the potential problem of a leak in an attic with the water heater going down to all the other floors. So I think the efficiency of a tankless water heater, I think, is better technology. There is a HVAC system called Unico.
Oh, yeah.
Which
We've
is
talked
a-
about that
we
a
know
lot
you,
here.
Nika.
So I think that's a better, more efficient for historic houses, a better way to go. So there's technology and things like that I think are better, that can help in an old house and make it more efficient, make it more comfortable.
But in terms of the structural, like actually putting up the frame of the house and the foundation, and we would
No, I
prefer
mean,
the old methods generally.
Well, only because most of the new products that you put on a house are glue and pulp, right? I mean, MDF is glue and wood pulp. Chipboard is glue and chips of wood. Oriented strand board is, it's what was wood with glue pressed, right?
The
So-
devil's wood.
Or Hardy. Hardy's a terrible product, I think.
Oh,
Oh,
that's
interesting. Yeah, we'd love to
I
hear
agree,
more.
but tell me
Yes.
more.
Yes.
Well, it chips, it falls apart. It doesn't have good shadow lines. It's really thin.
Interesting.
It's just such a joke. And so it
Yeah.
drives me crazy.
And expensive. It's an expensive
It's
joke. Is what it is.
expensive. And it's
Yes.
more expensive than wood in a lot of cases.
And
so
it sucks to install.
Yeah.
if
Installation's terrible.
people talk, cutting and the airborne particles, I mean, just if you're breathing that stuff, it's just a bad product. Same with the plastic, same with AZEK and some of those other trim boards. It's just those composite materials. Everybody looks at the new and says, oh, that's always better. It's just a mistake. It's like with the Whole30 diet. They say that you're supposed to find products that have 3 ingredients because if they have more than 3 ingredients, they're preservatives and other things that are in there that are bad for you. It's the same thing with the natural materials. I want to be one material. I don't want to be wood and something or stone and something, or I want to be wood, just the natural product. And people say, well, what about if it rots? What about if you install wood correctly, siding on a house, have an air gap, understand why it might peel and things like that? If you knew how to install it correctly, you wouldn't have that problem. If you knew how to pitch a windowsill so it doesn't hold water, your sills wouldn't be rotting. And so there's just a lot of bad craftsmen want an impervious product so their jobs won't leak. And instead, if they would just improve the craftsmanship, then understand how to get water away from the house, they'd build better things. And so, anyway, you got me going again.
No, that's a truly fascinating way to look at it that I haven't thought of. Like, we
And when you
create more
combine
impervious products to make up for what we lack in
Our
craftsmanship.
shortcomings,
and-
yes.
Yeah.
Well, and you look at the other challenge is that guys will build a new house and they'll sheathe it, they'll frame it and they'll sheathe it with Huber board or plywood or chipboard or whatever else. And then they'll apply the siding directly to the face of that. And you can't do that because when the wood's pressed up against there, it's going to cause a moisture problem. And there has to be an air gap behind there. And people don't know that. And so then the siding fails or the paint bubbles because it's holding moisture. And then they blame the wood. And it's not the wood, it's the craftsman. So it's frustrating.
Right. Yeah. I would like to pivot, if it's okay, to a couple, or not a couple, maybe just a handful or less of some of our listener questions.
Okay.
Like I said, they were very excited you were coming on the show. And so I picked out some that I thought might be interesting to everyone, hopefully including to you. So the first one has to do, we've been talking a lot about the exterior of a house, I think, but maybe going to the interior as well. Two people asked this question in two different ways. And it's basically, is it okay to make a vernacular, like sort of an average house pop by using millwork, even if it didn't have any originally? And the follow-up to that is, what is the maximum number of millwork styles that should coexist in one house? And I think we've kind of skirted that issue today, talking about, when things just don't look right. And but what would you say to that?
Well, being a millwork guy, I love millwork. I would say that each house has a story. Okay. And so if your farmhouse in West Texas from the 1890s, it probably didn't have a lot of ornamentation. Probably all the millwork that would have come in by rail. It was probably a house that was built as a plan book house. And so it's a very simple house. It was a, early structure that had been put up out there, to make that into a grand, Queen Anne Victorian, which would be appropriate by its age, but it's actually a vernacular farmhouse, that's too much. If you can create a story, craft a story with the moldings and things, and it's probably like a little dial that you can, move it a little bit, elevate your moldings and elevate your details a little bit, but you start doing too much and it's going to be a false story. It's going to be like, wait a minute, what is going on here? And so quick answer is yes, you can. Absolutely. You can improve, elevate, encourage better design with moldings, but the execution of it is real important, that you don't go overboard, that you find moldings that are appropriate for that period, and that you sell that story right. And so I think understanding that narrative, understanding what your house is and what it wants to be, and then helping it tell that story as good as you can. Moldings can do that probably easier and more quickly than anything else. And so I think moldings is a great way to do it. You just have to be careful.
Yeah. Okay. The next question I have is, it's similar, along the same lines, but there's a little bit of a difference. I think you'll be able to share some insight on this one. But when is it appropriate to combine architectural styles?
Well, I mean, it's always appropriate. I was looking at, there's a great book called Colonial Interiors I've recommended to my readers. There's a 3-part series, and it's basically all pictures of Georgian, Federal, and Greek Revival houses. And it's, they're grouped by stairs and by mantles and then by interiors and rooms and paneled walls. And it's a great book. And we were looking at mantles yesterday, and I was saying I wanted a Georgian mantle. And they go like, what is a Georgian mantle? And so I showed them the difference between a Georgian and Federal mantle. And the truth is that most things are transitional, okay? There isn't a pure, perfect Georgian house, and there's not a pure, perfect Federal house. There are all these blends of different elements and different details. And so, if you look at, if the Georgian period ended at the Revolutionary War, and then the Federal period starts after that, there's probably a 20-year swing, maybe even a 30-year swing, depending on where you are, of Georgian details coming into the Federal era and Federal details bumping up against the Georgian things. Same with Greek Revival, same with Victorian. And the later you get, the more transitional they become. I've walked into many period revival houses that are Tudor on the outside, and they'll have a colonial revival stair. And so in any case, it's the historic precedent for doing that is out there. And so you can feel you don't have to be totally pure. Now, at the same time, I would encourage people to try to be as pure as possible, only because it's going to be a better crafted narrative that's going to communicate. If I wanted an English Revival house, the more details that I put in there that are English Revival, the better that house is going to be than if I tried to put Victorian and Colonial Revival and arts and crafts in there, right? It would be kind of start turning into a mess. And so there is leeway to do that, but it just, you got to be careful.
Okay. And I have one more question for you. I'm going to ask you this one because Daniel and I do a Q&A portion on this podcast every episode too. And I feel like this is a question that somebody would give to us. And so I have an answer in my head, but I'd love to hear yours. It is how would you fix a split level house to make it look more traditional? And I want to say that, and by definition now, these split level houses are historic, being over 50 years. And so this question kind of gave me a little smile when I read it. And I'm just curious what you would say to that one.
Yeah. The crazy thing, when I first started in preservation, ranches style houses were just becoming historic. And we were looking at ourselves going, oh my gosh, what are we going to do with all these ranches that are now historic? Now, we get into 2030 and McMansions from the 80s are going to be historic.
No.
And, it makes me go, So the ranch period is a funny period. A split level ranch is tough to make it classical. And a lot of people will ask me, like I live in a 1962 ranch house. That isn't a very good ranch house. It's a mess. I mean, it's not a very good house. We love the neighborhood. We love the big trees and everything else. But I don't live in a great house. I think people are sometimes disappointed to hear that. But I tell them you need to embrace the split level and don't try to make it what it isn't. Because, kind of what I've been saying about this execution, you don't have the height in those houses. You don't have rooms with 12-foot ceilings in those houses. You have rooms with 8-foot ceilings. And so to make the classical orders work in an 8-foot ceiling is your chair rail's at 2 feet tall. And so it ends up being good. It would be hard to make a split level classical in a good sense. I would embrace that mid-century look and I would run with that.
Yeah. Lean in. I think don't try to make it something it's not is a great place for us to end today. And Brent, I just want to say thank you. This has been such a pleasure to have you. I've learned a ton. Every time I think I know a lot, I find out that I don't. So thank you for educating me and for educating everyone who listens.
Yes. Thank you so much, Brent. That was a real pleasure.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it.
Man, that was great. Stacy, do you feel like a different person having spoken to Brent Hull?
Well, I feel like I learned so much more than I even expected. He's one of those kind of people that if you just spend 5 minutes with him, you will find out what you didn't know.
Can I admit, I thought he was an architect all
Really?
these years. I just assumed.
Yeah, I don't think I knew one way or the other, but gosh, I guess there's no arguing that he's super talented and he's a wonderful contributor and ambassador for the Old House community.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here, Brent.
Thank you to all of you for listening to True Tales from Old Houses. Thank you to our guests, Josie Coleman and Brent Hull.
This show would not be possible without the generous support of our sponsors, the Window Course, Sutherland Wells, Repaint Studios, and Old House Hub.
To continue the conversation, come visit us on Facebook and Instagram at True Tales from Old Houses and follow Daniel at Daniel Cantor and Stacy, that's me, at Blake Hill House. Now in next week's mini-sode, we'll be following up on our current projects and chatting about an upcoming trip to Taliesin West in Scottsdale, Arizona.
Wait, what?
Pack your bags, Daniel. We're going.
Oh, okay. We'll talk about it after.
Until next time.
See you Monday.